My name is Adam Moskowitz. Talk is how to get your budget approved. This is a combination of a short version of a talk I did at LISA in, I don't remember when. If you look at my website, you'll find the full version of the slides for the old talk. It's also based on the Sage Short Topics booklet I wrote, which is called Budgeting for System Administrators. If you're a member of Sage, you can get it off the web for free. If not, you can buy it from them as a PDF or printed for like 15 bucks. I don't get any money from it, so I don't really care if you buy it or not. The latest versions of these slides, which Menlo.com. Trace down through there. There's a you might be able to find. Sorry, Menlo.com/PICC10 has the latest versions of these slides, plus my speaking notes, and they're in PDF. I promise this will not be death by PowerPoint. I have a few slides of things I want you to see. The rest of it, listen to what I'm saying. The version of the notes you have on your USB key includes my notes to myself as well. Purpose of the class, talk, whatever. Help you improve your chances of getting your budget approved. There's an assumption here that you already have a budget, that you know how much you're asking for, you know why you're asking for it, etc. I know that the description on the website said I was going to cover that part of it as well. That was before I found out I only had 45 minutes for this talk. Speaking of 45 minutes, I've got ballpark half an hour or so of material, assuming that you're going to ask about 15 minutes of questions. Please interrupt me if you have questions. I may tell you I'll get to it later, and if I don't answer your question, wave at me again down the road, and I'll either answer it or I'll tell you that it's coming up. The reason I picked this portion of the talk is that I think for most system administrators, figuring out what group of numbers to write on a piece of paper, what sorts of things you're trying to buy, is easier to do than figuring out how to get the budget approved, partly because this is the part that's not about technology. This is the part that's about people, about management, about business, etc. And that's the bit that most sysadmins don't know as well. We've got an agenda. 6 things, not going to take the same amount of time for all of them. There will be plenty of time for questions, and since I'm doing the next talk as well, we can sort of run over a little bit. One note, there are no hard and fast rules. Different companies want to do budgeting slightly differently. Different companies want things arranged slightly differently. They have different processes, etc. Adapt for whatever you need to, use your common sense, and be flexible. None of this is hard and fast. Also, obviously, this is based on my experiences. Your experiences may be different. I do have a bias. I've lived my entire professional life in the commercial world. I do not work in university settings because, to me, the funding model for university settings is fundamentally wrong. I can't wrap my head around it. It doesn't work. However, you should still be able to apply much of what I'm telling you here. It's just not going to be in quite the right form in some cases. And if you say, that's not going to work for me, chances are good you work for a university. So the agenda, some changes in attitude. I don't like to preach. I don't intend to spend the entire time preaching, but I'm going to do it a little bit for this first bit because there are way, way, way too many system administrators that need to hear what I'm about to say. If you are one of those system administrators who's hearing what I'm about to say for the first time and going, trust me, it will help you to learn this next lesson. If you've heard it before, just smile and nod and go on with it. Budgeting is about people, not technology. How you interact with people matters. Right? You're in effect going to somebody and saying, please may I have money? And the words you use to do that matter, your attitude matters, and the thing that matters the most is respect for the people you are talking to. Calling people bean counters, calling people suits, calling people losers, while to us may not sound offensive, it does indicate certainly to people outside of our profession, and to some extent inside our profession, it indicates some lack of respect or an attitude that's just not as cooperative as we'd like. I strongly suggest that you stop using those words, that you banish them from your vocabulary. You say, oh, this is just one of these things that will help my professionalism. The worst case is that you think you're only talking to other sysadmins and somebody overhears you, and then it's really bad. So just, we have people in the accounting department, we have, and by the way, my experience with most accounting departments, and I don't mean this to sound in any way, are often these sweet little old ladies who've been doing this stuff for forever, and if you make friends with them, can really help you. And they're actually usually really nice people. You're dealing with managers, and you're dealing with users or even customers, as the case may be. The people in the accounting department are really useful when you're trying to do budgeting. What's budgeting about? Budgeting is about money. Who knows about money in the company? The people in the accounting department. Most good accounting departments, you can walk down there and say, so, I need to know how much we spent on service contracts over the last 5 years, broken down by this or that or the other. And most of the good accounting departments will say, oh yeah, I can have that for you by lunchtime, right? Or you can say, how many people do we have? Now this will be an interesting thing. How many employees do we have, and how much per day are we paying them in salary? Not individual, but as an aggregate for over the total company. And again, they can get that number for you fairly easily. That's actually a really useful number when you're trying to justify things like downtime. As a simple metric, if people are sitting on their butts doing nothing, it's costing you at least their salary per day or per hour, whatever that they're doing. The folks in accounting do that stuff day in, day out, and can help you with it. You try and dig up those numbers, it's going to take you forever. Make friends of those people. They can really help. Managers, you're dealing with 3 different kinds of managers. Low-level managers, the first-line people, in general, they're going to help you figure out what goes in your budget. How many people are they planning to hire? What new projects are they working on? What specific computing needs do they have? If you don't talk to them, you don't know what to put in your budget. If you make up numbers and try for a budget and try and get it approved, chances are good that upper management's going to say, you know, why do we need that? We're not going to do that. Mid-level managers, for whatever you define mid-level managers, are often going to be the people who are going to help you get your budget approved. Because one of the things that you can do, we'll talk about later in specifics, is you can figure out what's needed for them. They come in and say, we've got these requirements, et cetera, work up the budget, and then hand them that chunk of paper or budget or whatever and say, look, when you go to do the rest of your budget for the rest of the year in terms of people and space and everything, here's the computing stuff you need. Go present it all as part of your budget, and then transfer the money back to me and I'll spend it for you. Right? It's their project, it's their money. Let them get the approval for it. Let them do your work for you. Upper level managers, they're the people who are going to say yes or no to your budget. Yes. And they're the people you need to learn how to talk to, and they're the people that ultimately you're going begging to. So, you know, respect for them, it's going to show making, you're not going to make friends of upper managers, but you're going to interact with them hopefully in a way that they don't find uncomfortable or unpleasant. Users, I know a lot of us don't like users. Users are why we have a job, right? Users or customers or whatever it is, if you don't have those, the technology doesn't matter, right? The computers are really cool and they do really cool stuff, but if nobody's paying to use those or they're not producing anything, you don't need to buy the computers. You go off and make a different business. It doesn't work. User satisfaction, which is really user productivity, is a really good way to justify your budget. Right? You could say, if we make this purchase, get rid of these old things, buy this thing instead, I can make the users 25% more productive. Right? Managers understand numbers like that. And they go, okay, so instead of putting out 500 widgets an hour, we put out 600 or whatever the number is. And you're like, yes, ooh, that's worth it. And they can also do the comparison, well, it's going to cost us this, that. Right? You can talk about user productivity, and the more you can show how you increase the productivity of the users, the more likely it is that upper management's going to say, yeah, that's a good way to spend money. So talking to managers, they don't understand, most managers don't understand technology. There are 2 really important things about that. One, that does not make them stupid, right? As often as I hear it, as often as you may think it, just because somebody doesn't understand technology does not make them stupid, right? There's a good chance that We understand about as much about what they do for a living as they understand about what we do for a living. Most of us in the room would like to think we're not stupid. We shouldn't think they're stupid just because they don't understand what we do. More importantly, it's not their job to understand technology. That's why they hired us, right? If they understood the technology, they could manage it, they could figure out how to manage it, they could go do it. We're here to, in effect, interpret for them from what the technology is and what the technology does to how the technology can help the company. Help the company make money, save money, why they need to do it, etc. Don't waste their time telling them the technical details. Don't waste their time telling them how it works. If they ask, sure. But in general, explain to them why they want to buy this, what it does for the company, not what the technology itself does. How does it save us money? How does it generate revenue? Those are the kinds of things that managers want to hear. When you're helping them understand this stuff, don't be condescending, don't use buzzwords. Buzzwords in general intimidate people. If nothing, at a minimum, they confuse people. Explain it in really simple terms. You don't need nearly as much technical detail as you think you want to give. Trust me on this. All they want to know is, not all they want to know. Their primary concern is the money, right? Or the use of the technology, not the technology itself. Chances are good that you're going to have to explain things to them more than once. I spent a bunch of time working in the biotech industry, and I've had my users try and explain things to me multiple times, and I still don't get it. Right? That's what it's going to be like talking to your managers. So explain it to them, expect them to come back, explain it to them again, expect them to come back again. And again, doesn't mean they're stupid, it means that they're trying to learn about something that's not in their area of expertise enough to deal with it. The fact that they're coming back and asking you, could you explain that to me again, shows at least they're interested enough, versus if they don't come back at all, they've probably written you off and you do. So what are the kinds of things you want to talk to managers about? Typically, the low-level managers, you're talking to them early in the process, as I said earlier. How many people are we going to hire next year? That tells you how many desktop computers you need. That tells you probably how much storage you need, maybe new printers, etc. What new projects do we have coming on? What old projects are going away? Maybe there are computers that we can get rid of. At a minimum, there may be computers we can take off service contracts. Managers are the people that are going to tell you that sort of information. And at that level, they really don't care about the technology. You're talking about people, you're talking about projects and things like that. A little bit about business. Everything about business is really about money. The technology exists to help the company make money. If we didn't have a business to run, they wouldn't hire us to buy all this cool technology and play with it. We wouldn't have a job that goes after it. Every dollar that gets spent has to go towards keeping the business in business. And whether that's saving money or actually increasing productivity or whatever it is, every dollar you spend has to go towards running the business. Managers understand the business. You understand technology. You need to figure out, obviously, in some cases, with the help of the manager, how the technology that you're proposing to buy is going to help the business. Because in the end, when you go and ask for your money and say, I need this much, the managers are going to say, why? And if you say, well, because we've got this cool web server that does this and that, they're going to go, yeah, go away. If you say to them, because it's going to save us this much money or increase our productivity by this much, or it's necessary to support this project, which is going to bring in however many millions of dollars, they look at it and go, oh, that's easy. One of the things you need to remember is that a primary part of a manager's job is to control costs. Managers, any individual manager may not have conflicting needs for, they need to do this, they need to do this, they've only got so much money to do it. But somewhere up in management, there is a bunch of needs. They're all important. Oftentimes they conflict. Part of the manager's job is to balance those needs. In some cases, what that matters to us is understanding that we may think we need something, we may ask for it, we may not get it. It's not usually, in an ideal world, it shouldn't be an arbitrary decision. It should be the manager says, this thing is more important than the other things, sorry you can't have your money because we need it over here. The other bit is, I don't know what it is, I'm sorry. If the managers get the balance wrong of putting money here, not putting money there, the company goes out of business. Right? It's their job to keep the company in business, therefore they need to make the decisions which don't always go in our favor. Again, the bottom line is what's important with the money we're asking for. If you can't see the connection to the bottom line, if you can't figure out, again, maybe with the help of the lowest level manager or ideally your manager, how what you're proposing to buy affects the bottom line of the company, the managers you're trying to get to give you the money aren't going to be able to see that connection. You can't go to a manager and say, we need to buy this really fancy file storage system that has this, and it's going to cost us $2.5 million, and expect them to understand why that's going to help the business. You need to say to them, we need to buy this fancy dandy storage system that's going to cost however many millions of dollars because it will save us this much money, or it will help us get this project out the door, or whatever it is. Math in business is a little bit funny. I know that equation doesn't make sense, but it's real. You can help the bottom line in one of two ways. You can generate $6 of revenue, or you can save $1 of spending. Money comes into the company. Not all of that money is profit, right? You have to take out overhead and salary and rent and all the cost of the computers and everything. In general, expenses are negative profit. Every dollar you spend subtracts from your bottom line, subtracts from your profit directly. There's no, we spend $1 and only 60 cents of it comes off the profit. No, you spend $1, $1 comes off the profit. Particularly in IT, it's almost always easier to save money than it is to make money. So, and most managers understand this, right? That they may disagree with my $6 figure, but in general, they understand that saving money is more important than making money until you get a really big spend. And in general, that's the easiest way for us to justify things that we're doing. Buy this thing, saves us how many dollars next year? If we're going, we currently do this, costs us whatever it is. We go out, we buy this new machine instead, we spend this much on it, it saves us this many dollars per year, we pay it off in however many years, and after that, we're doing even better. Managers understand that. More importantly, upper level managers, when they're looking at budgets, look for that exact thing. How much does this save us, or how much does this earn us, spread over how many years, what's the payback for it, etc. If that sort of math doesn't make sense to you, of how much are we spending on something, how much are we going to spend, save, etc., go to your manager. That's one of the things managers in theory understand. Go to the accounting department. Say, if we need to do, one of the reasons to go to the accounting department, capital equipment gets amortized in weird ways, and you think you spent $200 million, and you did, but it doesn't show up that way in any one year. And just go to the accounting people, tell them this, and they say, oh yeah, that actually costs us this much per year, and saves us this much in taxes. It's really one of those places you just go to somebody who's an expert in it and say, help. Questions so far? I know I'm blasting through this because there's more stuff at this level that we'll cover in a bit more. Yeah.
The depreciation part, I think it's simple enough. Everybody in the room could figure it out. Go to Wikipedia about depreciating, and I know everybody.
No, you see, here's the thing. Companies have a huge amount of leeway in how they depreciate things, and figuring out general depreciation and what the basic tax rules are, yeah, we can all figure that out. However, because of how they can allocate money within the company and what counts for certain things, they can depreciate different things at different schedules and rates. And so what they give you is the exact thing that it costs you based on the way they're going to account for it. So yeah, basic depreciation, simple. One of the other things I found out by talking to the accounting department one time is we had a machine, it wasn't depreciated, but I really wanted to get rid of it and it just wasn't being used. And it turns out that they had turned around and leased the machine to an outside company. And I didn't know this. I said, well, depreciation's not an issue anymore. They own the machine and we have to continue leasing it from them for the life of the machine. And so it's little stuff like that the accounting department knows that unfortunately isn't going to be able to compete. But yeah, the basic idea.
Well, at least between an operational expense and capital expenses.
Yes.
It's a good one. And this kind of goes to the point. I'm kind of the manager side a little bit with that. The more you can learn the language on that side, the more it's helpful. Just like if you have a manager that actually, you know, the difference between rate types would be helpful, not required, but you know, the more you can talk that way. And something else interesting, if your company is profitable and you spend a dollar in expenses, it reduces your tax burden. So there's all sorts of interesting things that can help you maybe make it.
Yeah, and again, you know, unless you are the manager of an IT group, most likely you're going to be doing much of your budgeting work with your manager. But as, I'm sorry, your name?
Scott.
As Scott says, the more you can talk to your manager in his or her language, the faster things can get done, the faster the two of you can get what you need, they need, whomever, to get it upstairs to wherever it is to get your budget approved. Management sees things differently than we do. And again, this is a function of job requirements and purpose in the company as opposed to intelligence level. We tend to look at things in terms of technologies. We see file servers and we see compute servers and clusters and this and that and the other. Management tends to look at things in terms of projects, departments, cost centers, things like that. Do it their way, right? When you're holding up a sign and somebody says, here's what I want to spend and here's why, the easier you make it for them to understand, the more likely they are to say yes. People, when you're talking about spending a lot of money, particularly when you're talking about spending millions of dollars, people are not going to say yes if they don't understand what you're talking about. And if you confuse them, they're going to go, maybe we'll wait on that, or let's talk about that again later. So anything that you can do to make it so that the people you're presenting to understand what you're talking about, the better your chances are of getting the money approved. That doesn't mean that you're going to purchase it that way. That doesn't mean you're going to manage it that way. It means that when you're going asking for money, talking their language, not ours. At a certain point, somebody, maybe you, maybe your manager, maybe both of you, are going to actually sit down with upper management and start asking for money. This is where it gets, where I think I've got some very specific things that I have found to be helpful. The first is, start with your service contracts. Just, we have this much equipment, here's what our service cost us last year, here's what it's going to cost us this year. You said this is the level of support that you want. 4-hour response time, 24 hours a day, whatever it is. Users to be able to call 5 days a week. You set the limits on what level of service we had. Here's how much it costs. It's the cost of doing business. That's it. And in general, if it hasn't gone up a whole lot, they're just going to say, yeah, okay. Or they're going to say to you, hopefully they're going to say to you, let's find a way to reduce that, not just cut the cost, but maybe we don't need that level of service. Let's go back and revisit it. But in general, it's, they ask for something, here's the cost of it, it's an ongoing cost, let's just move on to the next bit. If it's going to cost a lot more than it did last year, and there are some hardware companies out there that after a machine is a certain age, your service contract price goes way up. At that point, it may be cheaper to replace the machine. You'll get a benefit of a newer machine. One thing in replacing machines these days, issue is they're often more energy efficient. So you can look at, it's going to save us this much in electricity, it's going to save us this much in service contracts, and given a typical hardware service contract is about 10% of the purchase price per year. That's in the early stages, and I've seen it climb as high as 50% per year after 3 to 5 years. It's really easy to justify the cost, saying, you know, we keep the current machine, here's how much your service contract costs. Go buy a new machine, in addition to all the saving, our service contract drops to here. Here's the payoff in terms of number of months, years, whatever it is, and here's our benefit in extra productivity and savings in space, cooling, electricity, etc. If you're going to do that, simply leave it out of the service cost and present it as the first item, or present all of those changes as the first item in your pile of new purchases. Say, we're proposing to take these things off of last year's service contract, buy these replacement machines instead. You've already got them thinking about here's the cost of doing business, here's what we've established as our baseline for support, we're willing to spend this, we've been spending it, there's no change in service, we're simply proposing to change a machine to make things more efficient and cost less. So you're in there, you're talking with your managers and things. At almost guaranteed at some point somebody's going to say to you, so how much did we spend on this stuff last year? Or how much did it cost us in service contracts this year? How much has it gone up or down or whatever? How much did we budget for it last year? And how much of that budget did we actually spend? Did we stay under budget? Did we go over? You need to know those numbers. If they're really complicated questions, you can say, yeah, I'll come back with that answer. But in general, if you go into a budgeting meeting, you ought to be able to say, here's how much we budgeted last year, here's how much we actually spent, here's how much we're proposing to spend this year, percentage of change, etc. Your accounting department can help you with all that. Your accounting department is particularly good that they're not going to have a copy of your budget, but they're going to have the copy of the actual money you spent. And so you've got your budget from last year, you can look at it and go, oh, we were thinking 10 bucks of it, or we blew it by $250,000. Management will want to know that sort of stuff, so go forward on that. The next bit of things that I suggest you do in the buying new stuff is machines, resources, etc. that you need to support new employees. You're saying to management, you said we're going to hire X number of people next year. Here's what it costs to provide computer support for those people, right? I'm not saying, gee, let's go out and buy 50 workstations. I'm saying, you told me to hire, or you said you're going to hire 50 people, and you told me to give them workstations. Here's what that's going to cost you, right? So it's the idea that you're telling them, this is your idea. I'm just putting a price tag on it. And if they don't like the price tag, they're the ones who get to go back and say, maybe not everybody needs an Apple iMac with a 30-inch screen. You know, maybe we can give everybody laptops or whatever it is. And it's their numbers, their ideas, and so whether they say yes or no to it is really up to them. But if they say no, you can say, well, you know, you told us we needed these, what do you propose instead? Right? Or you just changed the rules, we need to go back and recompute. Getting people to spend money on things that are their idea in general is easier to get them to spend money on things that are your idea. It's just people work. Hopefully you know how much it costs for an individual employee. It's not just their desktop. It's software licenses, it's additional printers, it's additional paper usage, toner usage, whatever it is, maybe even power. So obviously somebody else takes care of the desks and all that stuff. But you should be able to give them a number and say, it costs us this much per new employee. Maybe management wants to say, maybe we should only hire 45 employees rather than 50. And you go, oh, okay, that's easy, number becomes this. Finally, you get down to the stuff that, here's new things that we're going to buy for whatever reason. I mentioned this earlier, but to the greatest extent possible, make your big purchases part of somebody's project, right? We're buying this supercomputer, not because we think it's cool, but because Joe in the sequencing department decided that they want to take on this project that you approve and needs this kind of computing horsepower. Here's what he needs to get his job done. And again, it's not the sysadmin or the IT group, which for better or worse is generally viewed as a cost center. Oh yeah, there those guys go spending their money again. This is Joe in sequencing, who's making money for the company, wants to spend this money to make more money for the company. Joe's project, all I'm doing is supporting it. You know, if you guys don't like the project, tell Joe, and I'll buy less computing for it. And again, if you can, figure out the compute costs, give that to the manager, so when Joe goes to get that whole project approved, because he's going to need budget for people and sequencing machines and whatever else, he can just say, oh yeah, we're buying the supercomputer as part of it, and then he turns around and lets you spend the money, right? He's got the whole project, and if management's going to approve it, they're going to approve the whole big thing or none of it. Hopefully management's not going to approve his project, but not approve the computers he needs for it. So let him do the work for you. And in general, managers are happy to do that, right? You're helping them out. You're helping them figure out how much their project's going to cost, how much work they're going to have to do to get the stuff in, you've gone and figured out all the hard stuff. They gave you requirements, you said, here, your requirements cost this. They go, great, I'll deal with it from here. And again, that's part of know the managers. Go talk to them and say, work with them about things like this. Let them do the work for you. When you're organizing your budget, don't organize things by machines. Organize them by projects. So typical sysadmin thinks about a purchase like this. We're going to buy a couple of servers. They're each going to have so much memory. We're going to get a bunch of tape drives, a bunch of disks, disk adapters, blah, blah, blah. You could take that into a budgeting meeting and they start like, now, what are these servers for? And let's say the servers are going to 2 different projects. Which one needs how much memory? And don't do that to them. Right? Management doesn't want to see it. Present it to management this way. So that project that we're doing for here, they need a lab system. It's got 1 server. It's got this much memory. It's got this much disk. It's got this much tape. And I probably wouldn't even present that much detail to them. But here's a server. Here's roughly what it's got to do. It's for this project. It's going to cost this much. The production system that we're doing this other thing for, it costs this much here, done this way. Now, yeah, when you go to the vendor, you're going to lay it out the way we have here. Right? The vendor wants to see this, or obviously this may even go to multiple vendors. When you're getting the money, management wants to see it this way. You don't have to work on it that way, you just have to present it that way. If it makes sense to centralize things, maybe you do it this way. So we've got the lab system here that costs this much, we've got the production system here that costs this much, and we've got the storage system that handles them both, and it costs this much as well. One disadvantage to this approach. They say, well, you know, the production system, we definitely need it, but maybe we're going to scrap the project that uses the lab system. How much can you reduce, how much can you reduce this part of the budget? How much can you reduce that storage server by? Be prepared for them to ask that question, and hopefully it's a relatively simple answer. If it's one of these things where you've got lots of interconnected stuff, at that point you can say to them, you know, that's going to take me some time to figure out. How about we work on the rest of the budget and we'll come back and approve this stuff later. The advantage to doing that is if you get it wrong, particularly if you get it wrong of saying it's only going to cost $1 million when it's really going to cost $2 million because you miscalculated something on the fly, standing in front of a bunch of people or making you nervous, that really isn't going to help you down the road. And if it's complicated, no one's going to hold it against you. If you say, you know, it's going to take us some time to tease that apart and recalculate the stuff, can we come back with it? Right? That's really not going to be a problem. On the other hand, if you can't do it at all, and you say, oh, we can't split that up and everything, at that point they might just say, oh, okay, we won't buy any of it. That's fine. So be prepared to recalculate numbers and things like that. Also, if you have to buy things, how am I trying to explain this? If the storage system is something that doesn't divide up evenly, let's arbitrarily say into 1/3 and 2/3, right? You can't buy 2/3 of that system just to support the production system. If you need to explain to them, you know, we actually need to buy 7/8 of the system, even if we're only doing one of these projects, be prepared to explain why you need to do that in non-technical terms. Even less technical than when you're talking to the lower level managers about what their requirements are. Upper level management really doesn't want to hear, well, we've got this dual channel fiber card that's in the server, we can't reduce that because the single channel card, you've lost it. You're doomed at that point. So explain it in non-technical terms, and if you can't explain it, simply come back, say, look, let me rewrite this as the 2 individual pieces, and I'll come back and just show it to them, rather than give them the example. Well, how come it doesn't cost 2/3 as much? Finally, play nice with others. At some point, they're going to say no to you. In fact, I can pretty much guarantee that every year they're going to say no to at least part of it. It might be in the form of, look, we're really trying to cut things, or we're trying to stay cheap, by a better word. Find a way to cut 15% from your budget and come back to us. And if it's really simple, if it's kind of thing, you know, well, we were going to do this project and that's about 15% of the cost, we could just drop that. Great, tell them that on the spot. If it's more complicated than that, say, okay, I'll come back, we'll schedule it for, you know, can we do it in a week? If it's a complicated budget, they really don't expect you to be able to pull 15% out of it on the spot. And you need to go back and figure out what bits affect what other bits and how you're going to do it. No matter what it is they say to you, they might say, you know, cut your budget in half, or drop these projects or something, redo it. Be graceful about it. Don't whine, don't complain, don't, you know, pout. Just say, okay, let me go figure out how to do that. I'll come back to you with updated numbers. Go talk to the appropriate managers, etc. There are a couple of reasons for doing this. One is if you push back too hard and say, we can't cut any of it, they might turn around, I've seen this happen, they just turn around and say, fine, we won't spend any of it. That'll save us a lot of money. We can do without that stuff. That's not what you want. The other thing is they say, okay, we'll find a way to cut 15% of your budget for you. I guarantee that you will like your own cuts more than you like theirs. Just guarantee it will be easier. Or worst case, they'll say both. They'll do both. Right? They're like, you know, we're not going to spend any of it, and we'll have this other guy figure out a new budget for computing, and we'll tell you what you're going to get to spend. So they say no to something, you say, okay, that's fine, let me go figure out how to give you what you're asking for. And again, no one is going to hold it against you if you can't figure that out on the spot. Now, you may need to go back to them and say, you know, guys, I really can't get 15% out. Here's why. And at that point, you can say to them, I can't get it out. A typical thing you might say to them is, I can't get rid of it because you've said you want this project, and this project. Which one of these do you want to scale back? Let them make the decision based on the business requirements, and then you simply scale back the amount of computing that you're providing to them. It's not your job to say, well, Joe's only going to do, you know, 2/3 as much sequencing as he had planned, or, you know, so-and-so's only going to produce half the number of widgets. Let management make that decision, and then you can scale back your budget. But it's not unreasonable to say, I've gotten it down to the absolute minimum based on the requirements you or your mid-level managers gave me. If we can't get at anything less than that, we need to cut projects, not just computing resources. And that's not an unreasonable thing to happen. In general, you don't want to go back to them with the exact same thing and say, you know, we thought about it, we really do want to spend this money, we really do think we need to spend this money. If you're not coming back with the cuts that they ask for, you need to be able to say, we can't do it because of these business reasons, therefore you need to change the business model or the business plans to reduce the budget. But just going back to them and saying, no, we can't cut 15% of our budget. Bad idea. The other thing, and this is one of those sort of touchy-feely things that most techies are going to go, if you're at a budgeting meeting and they say, look, we're really trying to cut back on stuff, find a way to shave 15% off your budget, and your answer is, okay, I'll go work on that, you get credit for being the proverbial team player, right? To a lot of techies, that really doesn't matter. You just say, yeah, whatever. It helps, trust me. If you're seen as cooperative, they are more likely to consult you in the future when they need to make further budget cuts, rather than just turn around and say, you know that money we told you we were going to spend? Well, we're not going to do it. They come to you in advance and say, hey, you know, we hate to do this to you, but we need to reduce the budget more. Where do we do it? Help us figure out how to do that. And again, it's you like your own budget cuts more than you like somebody else's. A lot of technical people really don't care about, I don't say don't care about, it's not important to them to how they're perceived in the company or where they're perceived to fit in the company hierarchy or culture. It matters to the managers in terms of how much they involve you. And a typical system complaint is, well, they didn't ask us before they cut our budget and everything. Well, maybe there's a reason they didn't ask you. And if you're seen as somebody who's helping them get the job done, someone who's helping them figure out how to save money, they may well ask you in advance next time. And again, it's okay to argue against the cuts. You can say things like, you know, look, this really will save us money, or it will save us, however much in the cost of how many sysadmins we need to hire. The company may say, we'd rather hire another sysadmin than make, such and such a group do their job differently. It may be because they just cost more than you do, or it may be that they bring in more money than you do, or save more money than you do. That's okay. They get to make that decision. But again, you want to argue for it reasonably and calmly and say, here's why I think you're making the wrong decision. But then when they say, okay, well, we're going to make that decision, your answer is, okay, fine, I'll come back with the changed budget, or yeah, we can do that. Because remember, it's their money. They get to spend it however they want. One of the things that you can do that will help you, particularly when you're cutting money in your budget, is, at least in your own head or in your copy of your budget, you can organize the budget into, here are the things we absolutely have to stay in business, right? If we're a web hosting provider and we're growing at 100 customers a year and they take 3 servers each, we've got to buy however many servers for that, or it just doesn't work. Then there's the, here are the things we really ought to do. These things will save us money. These things are, or this machine's getting old, we really ought to fix that, or this software is really getting hard to use, we should consider buying something else. Finally, you've got the, well, these are the things that are nice to have. It'd really be nice to be able to upgrade from version 1 of something to version 2, or whatever it is. If you know where those divisions are, when people were asking you to cut your budget, you can sort of look at it and go, well, we've got this stuff over here that we kind of wanted to do. We could get rid of that. And maybe they say to you, well, let's cut 15%. You can look at it and say, could you live at 12.5? And they might just say, yeah, it's close enough. Particularly if you can do it right off the top of your head. And if you've got on your copy of your budget where those sort of divisions are, when you're starting to cut money, it's like if they say, well, cut 10% and you lose the nice to have stuff, okay, maybe you just say, yeah. If they start moving into the important things, then maybe you start trying to persuade them a little bit. If it's all the way up into the, we've got to have this stuff, then you really make the argument, again, calmly and politely, of, look, this is what our business is doing, this is what we need to support the business. If we change it, we need to change our business requirements. Right? I'm sticking by my budget, or you're telling me my requirements are different. One of those two. And if you know where those sort of divisions are in your budget, it makes it easier to think about how much do you resist when making various cuts. You don't have to show those to anybody else, and ideally you don't make them too obvious, because if the managers are really good, they'll sort of look at it and go, yeah, those last 5 things, they look interesting. Let's just drop them, because I know you don't really need those. One thing you need to be aware of is that budgets almost always have dependencies. If you say, we're not going to do this project, or we're going to do this way instead, there may be changes in what you need to buy in your budget or what you don't need to buy. In particular, if you say to somebody, oh, well, if we're not going to do that project, we can save even more money over here, you may regret giving back money that you didn't need to. On the other hand, it helps in terms of your interaction with the management. So, if there's a lot of dependencies in that, somebody says, well, we need to cut this, and say, I think I need to come back to you with a different budget that would be even lower than we've got now. Let me come back in a day or two. That's it. There's the URL for the slides. I think they're going to post them on the LOPSA website as well. Also, on that URL there's a PDF copy of the slides. What's on your USB is PowerPoint only. I apologize about that. There's any questions? Going once. Yeah.
So one of the problems we run into is we'll submit an annual budget, and go back and forth the whole process, describe it, and come back and be, now these are the projects that are actually approved. But then they come back and they slot it as, okay, here's your Q1 budget, your Q2 budget, your Q3 budget. And maybe they took that $300,000 project and thought, oh, we can split it up. Or
sometimes you can say, look, it just doesn't work that way. Sometimes you can say, okay, but we can't spend it that way, so we're going to have to delay the start of this project until whenever. Fortunately, I don't find that to be so much of an issue as they come back to you later and say, you know, we're going to reduce the scope of this halfway through the project. And I think that's a harder problem to deal with. Sure.
One thing about what a budget is, and the way that you can utilize that, and this is different in every company, but a budget is the amount that you can spend without more approval, right? So, yeah, that's the theory of a budget, is that they're committing to spend to this. Now, a lot of times that changes, but ways you can use that to your benefit is that you can say, you know, if you know in your head that, you know, you need a new firewall because you're reaching the limits of, you know, throughput on your firewall. So you need to be able to have some, you know, some kind of, you know, bigger, better firewall. If they're saying, okay, we need to cut some of the budget, you might say, okay, well, let's cut this firewall out because you know that in 2 months it's going to be an emergency that you need it and they'll spend the money. You know what I'm saying? There are things, and it doesn't work in every company. But there are certain ways that you can say, okay, it's not a big deal that you want to prove that because I know I can get it later somehow. You know, budgets aren't set in stone. They are basically I mean, in some companies they are.
Well,
but
I mean, the thing to remember is that our business changes, right? The economy tanks, the economy booms, whatever. You're going to change course, change what you're doing mid-course. It's just think of it as, oh, that yearly budgeting cycle. Well, it just got cut in half. We're going to do the whole exercise again.
Right.
It's called being in business. Any other questions, quickly?
Just one comment. I've noticed that budgets tend to be negative feedback loops. The people that go over budget get budgeted more. People that came in under budget tend to have the budgets cut, and so you get punished for good stewardship. In many cases,
some places,
you have to know, you have to know where you are.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that works that way. That there are ways around it that aren't part of budgeting, unfortunately. So.